And thirdly, whether you're buying a house, whether you already own a house, having good scores will help you with everything that you will be doing in your life. So the home ownership is important. Buying a car, it makes a difference what your score is. Getting a job. Um, Bishop Curry and I were talking just a minute ago. Nowadays, some people don't get a job because their score is low. So even a job needs a good credit score. First item on that little list, it says knowledge is power, but it's also protection. In credit, what you don't know can hurt you. And a lot of people get hurt with things that they usually fight on the credit issue. And the biggest financial threat in the United States of America right now when it comes to credit, can anybody guess what that is? It is identity theft. Yeah. And so there is so much damage done, and usually by the time you find out, it is too late. And people have invaded your life. They have taken over your life to where you cannot get into your own websites or email accounts anymore. And all your passwords were changed, and your money is gone, and somebody charged against your credit. And so identity theft is the biggest challenge, the financial challenge in this country nowadays. Now, first of all, go ahead. It is definitely LifeLock. It's one of the many organizations that does a credit monitoring. I want to say it's better than none, but we also have something called a credit freeze that I want to discuss later, that I want to give to you as an idea. That LifeLock basically checks, but they might tell you after the damage is done. My thought is to give you something where you can prevent the damage before it happens. So I have another suggestion on that subject. Now, first of all, what is a credit score? And the definition, it's a 3-digit number generated by mathematical algorithm using information in your credit report. It's designed to predict risk, specifically the likelihood that you will become seriously delinquent on your credit obligations in the next 24 months. So, plain English, your whole entire life and how you handle credit is reduced or condensed into a 3-digit number. This is everything you do, how you pay your bills, what kind of bills you have, how big the bills are. Everything is reduced into a 3-digit number. Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion are the 3 big credit bureaus, and their official title is the Clearinghouse for Consumer Credit, if you want to write that in. Clearinghouse for Consumer Credit. They're the ones that have these gigantic databases, and everything you do is reported, like Big Brother type thing. Now, scores range on the lowest side, 300. The highest you can have is 850. So, of course, we all strive. I've never personally saw anybody with 850, and I see credit every day, but I have seen 812, 820, and maybe later share briefly with you the times when you see these super high scores. What is the common denominator? You know, because anybody should try to get there. Try to get the high scores, because whatever you buy, whether a house or a car or get a job, a better score gives you a better end result. Now, what hurts a score and what doesn't? There are some misconceptions. People think, well, my income, if I don't have income, or God forbid, I'm unemployed, I have a lower score. That is absolutely not true. Your income has nothing to do with it. I've seen people with low income that have super good credit. I've seen people with very high income that have terrible credit. It has to do with how you handle your bills. So income has nothing to do with it. Misconception number 2, If you pay your bills on time, you will automatically have excellent credit. Well, would you believe that's one component, but that is not enough to get up to that 800 plus score. There is more to it than just paying your bills on time. Now, order of importance. When a lender such as us or a car dealership or whatever you might do, when they look at your credit, the first thing we look for is what type of credit do you have? Now, there's two major types. One is called an installment loan, and the other one is a revolving account. So, under installment loans fit mortgages, student loans, or other installments such as car payments. So those are the most highest ranking, the highest value when somebody evaluates your credit. Now, what makes an installment loan different from a revolving account? There's three major components where installment loans are different. Number one, an installment loan has a specific end date, like a car payment, like a mortgage. It has a specific end date. Number two, an installment loan has a fixed payment. So if your car payment is $300 a month, then that's all you pay, and nobody alters that. You have a contract from the car dealership, from the lender, you have a fixed payment, and it stays like that. Number three, there is a fixed number of installments. So if you have a 3-year car loan, you have 36 payments, nobody will change that. You have a contractual agreement for that. That's what makes an installment loan the safest type of lending, because it's so stable and so fixed and it does not fluctuate. So if you go to page 2, the opposite category is revolving accounts. That will be the credit cards in your pocket, your Macy's and your Dillard's and your JCPenney and your Lowe's, that and the Visa and the MasterCard and the American Express and all that. Those are your credit cards. Those are revolving accounts. What are the 3 characteristics for that? Number 1 is no end date. A credit card, you get that, and if you make your payments on time, you can keep that credit card indefinitely. So it's what we call an open-end loan. Number 2, it has variable payments. So if you today just get, fill up your car with gas, $50, that might be, next month your payment might be $20. Or you could go to Lowe's, buy yourself some, and spend several $1,000s, when then the monthly payment, of course, is higher. So we have variable payments instead of fixed payments. And number 3, that's different, where revolving is different than installment is, once you have opened it, you can borrow against it again and again. So different from an installment loan, you cannot borrow again from an installment loan. So you can borrow additional monies at your discretion anytime. So that's, revolving accounts for that reason, because there's more fluctuation, they're not as stable. So going back to building credit, a lot of people don't know, have something of each category. Some people have credit cards, but that's an installment loan. It's good to be debt-free. First of all, we want to have a debt-free life. But in this country, you have to have something open, because credit bureaus judge you by open credit. And I love Dave Ramsey, because he says, pay everything off. I'm of that philosophy. However, don't close everything, because otherwise you lose your good scores. So there has to be a balance. So in order to build the best credit at 800 some score, you need to have both installment loans as well as revolving accounts, a good mix. Now, what creates damage on your credit? Number 1, missing a mortgage payment, if you have a mortgage. Missing a mortgage payment. Now, every company treats things differently. I'm with Wells Fargo. You get a little bit of a grace with Wells Fargo. If you're 30 days late, we don't report it yet. People will chase after you, but we don't report it until you're 60 days late. But not every lender is that lenient. So you don't even want to go close to that. Missing a mortgage payment is definitely the worst damage. Number two, going delinquent on a student loan. Now, student loans creep up on people. I have met so many people, they had gone to class, there's a 6-month grace period before they have to start paying. Well, they've been in class for years, never had to make a payment. Then they have the 6 months grace period, don't have to make a payment. They actually kind of forgot that sooner or later they have to make a payment. They just forget. And some of them don't even get a statement from the student loan center, which is not good. But all of us do, and you overlooked it, and then they mark you late. So you really want to watch a student loan very closely, because after that 6 months period, if you haven't gotten them in the mail, like by the 5th month, you need to call the student loan center and make sure they send you a bill. Next one, going 60 days late on a car payment creates a lot of damage. So because again, it's an installment loan. So see, the first 3 biggest damages have to do with missing something on an installment loan because it has the most weight. Next, ignoring a tax debt. So this is an important one, and you might think it has nothing to do with credit. But if you had filed your taxes and the IRS says, you owe us some money, and what if you cannot pay that? And you don't address it with them, they can put a tax lien on your credit. Tax lien is terrible damage. It can cost you 50, 60, 70 points in one instance. So if you have to deal with the IRS, you want to make sure you want to make a payment arrangement to avoid them saying, well, this person is delinquent, they don't respond, and they slap a tax lien on your credit. You definitely want to avoid that. That goes under public information. That goes in the same place where bankruptcies and foreclosures go. So we don't want any public information on it. Next item of damage, letting a credit card go into debt collection. So let me explain. Let's say you have a credit card with Lowe's, and for reasons unknown, you get behind, and you get more and more and more behind, and they call you and they bug you, and you haven't paid. After a while, they basically give up on trying to get you back up to date and instead send this bill to collection. So now, the way we look at it on a credit report, when you pay something on time, it says 1. Every month you get a 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. That's what you want. If you're 30 days late, there's a little 2. 60 days late, a 3, and so it goes. But when you go into collection, they don't do the 1, 2, 3 anymore, where you can get caught up. Now they give you a 9. 9 is bad. You never want to have a 9 on your credit. So that's what we see. So you want to catch up on that before they close the door on you, give you a 9, and now the only way you can clean that up is to pay it in full. You definitely want to call them and say, hey, I need some help. I lost my job. I'm having a financial crisis. And talk to them to avoid letting any bill go into collection. Next item, going 90 days late on a medical debt. And this is something that's unfortunate because none of us can control if all of a sudden we have a big medical debt. Illness or accident can hit anybody. We just, it's something beyond, it's not financial mismanagement, it's just life. And so some people have some big medical bills. So once again, you want to negotiate with that hospital, with that doctor, with that dentist, whatever it might be. But you want to avoid at all costs to let that debt go into collection. And also, whoever has insurance, I don't know about you guys, I don't like to read insurance statements, but we really need to deal with the insurance and see what's my deductible, what do I have to do, even a dentist bill, there's a certain dollar amount that has to come out of our pocket. And so we want to make sure that we have nothing that fell between the cracks when it comes to medical bills. And the last one that does damage is maxing out a credit card. So let me talk about credit cards and credit limits. Let's say you have a credit card with $1,000 limit. The ideal balance you want to have is less than 30% of that credit limit. That should be at all times your balance. So in that case, $300 max. You never want to let your balance go higher. So, and then if you do, your scores drop. A lot of people don't know that. So let's say you're up to $900 on that credit card. I can guarantee you've lost 20 to 30 points just from one credit card. And now multiply that. If you have 5 credit cards and they're all maxed out and you lost 20 to 30 points on each credit card, your scores can drop a lot just from credit cards. And you've never even made a late payment. Go ahead.
Ms. Fernandez, does everyone start out at 850 and it works its way down?
Does everybody start out at 50, meaning? Oh, no, not at all. Everybody starts out
850 at the top and works its way down.
Nobody starts out high. People start out at 0 and they have to work out their way up. So let's say some of you have kids that basically start living their own life and they want to build credit. Now we have pulled credit reports that have no score at all. 0. No score at all because they don't have a history. So you build scores only because you have a history of having borrowed money of some kind. It starts out with empty, honestly. It's completely empty. It says no score available. And then slowly, usually what I see is about 500, low 600s when it starts building from the bottom up. And that's the key. I'm hoping to give you enough information to show you how to build and then get them better and better. Now, how to obtain your credit report and score. I put a separate flyer in your folder on the left-hand side, and that's the title, How to Obtain Your Free Credit Report. And basically, there is only one safe place that is sanctioned by the government, and you start out with annualcreditreport.com. Now, there's a million websites out there, and they offer you, but be careful. There is so much hacking going on. Be sure and you're not using any of the other ones. Now, when you do go to annualcreditreport.com, right on the main page, it says, do you want your credit report? It takes you to a few screens. It asks your name, your birthday, your social, your address. And then it asks you, do you want to pull an Equifax or an Experian or a TransUnion report? So I try to do that on a regular basis. So I myself, in preparation for this, one of my own reports. Be aware that they always ask you some test questions. So you want to know about your own credit before you go there. They may ask you, well, how much is your car payment? Is it between 2 and 3 or between 3 and 4? If you answer those test questions incorrectly, you will not get your free credit report that moment. Or they may say, well, what's your address? And they may give you 3 addresses you've never seen in your life. And then the 4th one says none of the above. Obviously, that was none of the above. Now, the last time I did this, they kind of got me by surprise. They asked me when I had an account from the past. And I had to think for a moment. I'm thinking, those questions are like trick questions, So, but they do that. They want to keep hackers out. They want to ask you some difficult questions so that somebody that's a hacker cannot pretend to be you, which is kind of safety thing. So you need to know your own credit situation before you ask for a free credit report, because there will be some test questions. And a new one was, oh, you got 3 minutes to answer. It's like, really? Okay, so be ready with know your stuff before you go there. But within a second, once you get past that point, here is your credit report, and then you want to print that out. Now, if by chance, which happens sometimes, you try to pull your credit report, you must have answered something wrong, and they won't let you have your report, which is highly aggravating. You can do Plan B, which my customers, I usually tell them to go Plan B right away because it's so easy and foolproof. Plan B is to actually call them. And so I have on this sheet first Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. And so you literally call. Now, not a real life person will answer the phone. It'll be pre recorded, but you speak into the voicemail, your name, your birthday, your social, your address, you spell it, whatever they want. And you will have a credit report, a paper credit report mailed to you in about 2 weeks. So this is the foolproof way if you're willing to wait a little bit, And so my recommendation for you is, if your credit is already pretty decent, what you want to do is stagger that. And like right now it's January, it's a perfect time. Pull an Equifax. And then 4 months later, pull an Experian. And again, 4 months later, pull a TransUnion. What that means, every 4 months, you're seeing your own credit and you can catch things. And they are free. Now, at one point online, they ask you if you want your scores. Now, you want to say no at that moment because they will charge you, you know. But if you do want to get your scores and you want to pay a few dollars, that's fine because it's a little bit more reliable than Credit Karma. So I put Credit Karma down on the bottom because it is still a good tool. There is nothing wrong with Credit Karma, but let me explain. If you go to Credit Karma one moment, like this hour, and pull your scores, which you get 2 scores, and then I pull your credit on the same day, which I pull 3 scores, they will not match. And people always question that, well, why don't they match? It's because the algorithm, the formula that is used to judge your credit and to end result, banks where we get that is more strict. Credit Karma is more lenient. So on any given day, the score you get from Credit Karma will be slightly better. The score you get from any bank such as us will be slightly lower because we go with a stricter algorithm. Credit Karma doesn't lend money. They don't have any skin in the game. We want to see, well, do we want to lend you some money? So we have a stricter judging process where we get the credit from. But nevertheless, Credit Karma is a good starting tool. There's nothing wrong with it to show you, well, where am I? Am I in the 600 range? Am I in the 700 range? That type of thing. One more thing about the sheet. On the very bottom, I put a number, a specific number for Equifax that with medical collections. So if I pull your credit today and you have a medical collection, or usually people have several, it will say account name unknown. It will give me very, very limited information because there's medical privacy laws. I'm not supposed to know your medical stuff. So what you can do, and only you can do that, is call that number and say, hey, I was told I have medical code that came from. Was that from a doctor? Was that from an emergency room? Was that a dentist? Where was it? Only you can obtain that. There's very little stuff that goes on our credit reports. So you have a special number for that. Going back over here to the main sheet, we already talked about credit scores and free credit scores from Credit Karma. But if you really want to have a score that's close to what we as a bank pull, you would have to pay for it again. And the main place for that would be myfico.com. So if you're wanting to pay and you want a credit report that with a stricter evaluation, but you do pay for it, you go to myfico.com. But if you just want to get a ballpark idea, Credit Karma is just fine and it's free. Now, what makes up a credit score? We have a little pie chart on the bottom here. And 35% of your score is from your payment history. So you definitely want to make your payments on time. Now, if you have a credit card and it says to you, well, we want $35 minimum payment. I want you to know if you only pay them $34, they'll mark you late. So you have to give them at least the minimum and you have to pay it on time. You always want to be early with your payment. Don't wait till the last minute. But you have to know what your minimum is. Um, True story. I see it all the time, at least once a month. People have allotment set up, military allotment, which is a fixed dollar amount every month. And they set up an allotment for like the AFES and the Star Card, and then they buy something big and they forget they had the allotment with the small payment. So, they told their allotment, send $80 to this place, but they bought something big. And then now the minimum payment went up to $120. So guess what? They went late. So watch the allotments to make sure you're not underpaying. So you always want to know what your payments are. If you have something automatically set up, make sure it doesn't backfire on you. The next item is types of credit. Makes up 10% of your score. And I'm going to combine it with the variety of credit, which is also 10%, because they go hand in hand. We talked earlier about installment loans and revolving accounts. Well, that's the variety of credit. You need to have a mix. And the types of credit falls into the same thing. So you want to have your credit mix, either mortgage, car payment, student loan on the installment side. I shouldn't say either or. You want both, plus some revolving accounts. Some people only have revolving accounts. You would never have an 800 score. It has to be a mix. Next category, length of credit history, 15% of your score. So some people, they jump. They see the 0% introductory rate. They jump to this store card. You got a Dillard's. And then you have this and that. Then you open all these cards. Don't do that. It's better to have a few cards that you have for many, many years than to jump from one to the other. First of all, when you jump, they pull credit again. Inquiries cost you points. So you really want to limit who you give your social to, who do you allow to pull credit, because that's a hit. So that's an inquiry. But once you have your cards, you make your monthly payments on time and keep them. Keep those cards open. The only exception is if you went overboard and you got 20 of them. So, in credit, it's a middle of the road approach. You need some credit, but you don't want too little and you don't want too much. It's basically a safe middle. 3 is not enough. Installment, probably 3, but total of 5 to 7 between both installment and revolving is ideal. And the last item here that makes up a score, it's a big item, is amounts owed, comprises 30% of your score. So you think, oh my gosh, if I owe a lot, then that hurts me. No, let me explain. So go to the next page over. The definition, amounts owed, has to do between the difference of what you owe and your credit limit. So that's what the definition is. Balance divided by credit limit. That's the amounts owed percentage. Balance divided by credit limit. So if my balance is $400, my credit limit is $1,000. So I have used 40% of what is available to me. That's my balance. In this case, the lower the percentage, the better score you get. So even if you owe 10,000 on something, and we're talking revolving accounts, if your credit limit is 100, you're only at 10%. It's all relative to your credit limit. So that's important. Now, the average credit score in the USA is, anybody want to guess? It's 700 actually. So that's actually better than I thought. but the average credit score in this country is 700. We figure, like, if I was doing a home loan and I pull an Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion report, we call it a tri-merge. So I have 3 scores for you. Does anybody know what score are we using? The middle, the middle. So it doesn't matter whether it's that, let's say you have a 680, a 700, and a 720. We literally kick out the highest, the 720. We kick out the lowest, the 680. We go with the 700. Now, what if you have a husband and a wife? So we get 3 scores for the husband, and we get 3 scores for the wife. So if his middle score is 700 and her middle score is 750, what do we use? We use the lower of the 2 spouses. So some people think, well, one spouse can pull up the other. That was 10 years ago. One spouse cannot pull up the other. We go with the lower of the 2. That means both spouses have to work on their credit. Even the cosigner, in the olden days, a cosigner could make for that. No, if you have a single person, and a cosigner, it's still the lower of the 2 middle scores. That's really, really important. So everybody has to work hard to get their scores up. And so that, go ahead.
Let's say a co-signer with someone, but you and your spouse have an average, let's say a 750, and the co-signer have a score of 500. How does that affect you?
This co-signer would decline your loan. So your co-signer has to have decent credit. The co-signer has to meet the same minimum requirements for that loan as the people that they're co-signing for. So the co-signer is usually added to bring some income to the table. But if you don't have good scores, they can hurt you from getting that loan. Yeah, that was his, exactly. And it happens. Believe it or not, it happens. Well, let me say this. If I was the loan officer, I would say we're going to have to restructure this thing because what you're hoping to do is not going to work. So we would want to figure out a way without that cosigner, honestly, or ask, do you have any other cosigner possibly? Because this cosigner, if any program like my VA, well, VA doesn't allow a cosigner. Let's say it's conventional, and I need a 620 score from each person. Go ahead. Good question. Good question. And there's a whole and actually ask 3 questions in one. So, first of all, so let me say this, and I can say this: we're in a church. If you can avoid co-signing, co-sign, please. The biggest, most heartbreaking I have seen is parent kids or even co-signing for the parents. It is heartbreaking. The family member ruins your credit. You gotta forgive. Oh, you do not want to co-sign, and that person that ruined your credit might stop you from getting your job 6 months down. You do not even know how much damage another person can do to you, and your own kids can do it, or your own siblings or parents can do. So if you can avoid, and the Bible says, do not be surety for your neighbor, lest they pull that bed out from underneath you, so it's even in the Bible. So avoid co-signing. But if you do co-sign, first of all, for a house, each and every person on that loan, whether it's the person that's going to live in the house or whether it's a co-signer, they have to meet the minimum requirements for that loan. So let's say a 620 score. So if you're trying to co-sign for a child and they have a 500, they cannot get a home loan. It's not going to happen. They have to work on their credit. So that's that. Now, if you do co-sign, let's say you co-sign for a student loan or whatever, you have your social here and it's reported. Their social there, it's reported. As long as those payments are made on a timely basis, you're only judged by the payment history. You just have to make sure it gets paid on time. The child that you co-signed for, even though they had a lower score than you, that's not going to affect your score. But now if they miss a payment, everybody's score is affected. That's why you don't want to co-sign if you can avoid it. So. Mm-hmm. Not at all. Your social is not on the line. And for credit purposes, they're not. They're not. I could, on a given day, I pull your credit, and let's say that everything in your life is joined. Your house is joined, your car is joined, your credit card is joined. Then ideally, you should have the same score. But let's say that you have an additional credit card that your spouse doesn't have. That's why, if you have different accounts, that's why your scores are not the same, because there's different reporting issues. Or God forbid, I see that all the time. One spouse, I had a husband with a 750 and the wife had a 650 because of one student loan that she missed. Only her name was on it. So that one student loan pulled her score down, but that has nothing to do with him. He was not on a loan, so that's important. It's the performance. Go ahead. Okay. Right. Right. So let me say this. I see your question. When any lender looks at, well, I want to do a loan for you. First of all, I want to do the loan without a cosigner. I want to do the loan for whoever's going to live in the house. But let's say it's somebody, they just don't have enough income. They just simply, it's a young couple, they're starting out, but they're doing a good job and they don't want to rent anymore. They want to buy. Well, that's a great thing. So, but they don't have enough income and they want a decent house, a certain size, certain area. So now I'm looking at, can we add a cosigner for income to bring that total income up? And so if they say, well, my mom can do it, right? So then with their permission, I now have to talk to the mom, and the mom has to do everything that that couple has to do. The mom has to allow me to pull her credit. The mom has to give me income docs, her pay stubs, her W-2s, her bank statements. The mom gets treated just like the couple that's actually buying the house. So now I'm sitting here and I pulled the mom's credit and I'm looking, oh no, she has a super low score. Now, if she still falls in my minimum criteria, let's say I have a 620 criteria, she has a 621 score, then I can still squeak that loan in with the mom's income. But if the couple has good scores and the mom has low scores, their interest rate just got worse. I might be able to do the loan, but I have 5 different tiers for scores, and the higher your score, the better your interest rate. So the mom helped them get the loan because of the income, but she hurt them on the credit, on the interest, because their scores were lower. So there's a give and a take. So I would try anything I could to get the mom back off of there because she's pulling down that couple. And I would say to them, well, what if we pay that car off? I can eliminate that debt. See, I'm now going in my brainstorming mode. What can I do to get a yes answer for this loan? That is what I do all day long. Get a yes answer for this loan. And maybe we'll find some other solution, something creative. But yeah, it can happen. It can happen. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's a give and a take, definitely. Mm-hmm. Right. And the bottom score varies by the program. And it even varies a little bit by lenders. So for me, and VA is my most lenient, 600 even. Um, then I have conventional 620, FHA, USDA 640. Those are the most common programs. Now, I am a mortgage banker, not a mortgage broker. I can be a little bit more lenient. A mortgage broker has to sell the loan to a bank. So they're a middleman. So their score requirements might be a little bit more stringent than mine. So I think I can be like, I know all the mortgage brokers in this town, you need a 620 for VA, and I can do a 600, because I'm not a mortgage broker. So it's a very low score, very low, and you're not going to get the best interest rate in the world. But at least you can get a house with 0 down payment on a VA. So, like I said, we have about 5 tiers. Well, that's important. Um, Now, let me see here. We already talked about the lower of the two for husband. One thing that should never be on a credit report, and that's discrimination, age, race, nationality, or religion. Has nothing to do with your score. Your score has to do with your payment history, and we just looked at the pie chart. Now, avoid these loans if you can. And these are loans that usually are high interest rate. 401k, if you borrow from your own retirement, if you have to, then at least pay yourself back, because you're taking away your own future. You're taking away your nest egg for your future. So try to stay away from borrowing from your own retirement. Payday loans, those are, I call them the loan sharks. So, they charge you that 14, 16% interest, some 20%. You would only go there if you have an absolute, desperate need for money, but they charge you an arm and a leg. Title lenders are the people that take your car title. For some, don't go there, because if you don't pay that back, you have just lost your car. And then the rent to own contracts, and some people have no other way. Let's say you need a new washer and dryer and you just don't have the money. If you do a rent to own washer dryer, fine, sooner or later you own it. But if you add up what you paid, it's probably double than if you had paid for the washer dryer from the beginning. So try to avoid the rent to own. Now, what if you don't have any scores? What's a fast way to build scores? Idea number 1, become an authorized user on somebody else's credit, somebody that trusts you. It could be a family member. It could even be a friend. So what you want to write here, number 1, it's a trust issue. Somebody has to trust you because they're now adding you. So let's say they have a Visa card. They have to call the Visa company and say, I want to add Susie as an authorized user to my Visa card. So the company then sends Susie an extra card. And Susie is not liable for the payments, but she's allowed to use the card. Well, that's a big trust issue. So now one thing you can do, if you want to help somebody, you add that person, you add Susie, but you say, Susie, I'm going to add you so you can ride my coattails, but you ain't getting the card. That's what I would do. I mean, Susie would never get that card if I was helping her, because she can run up the tab and mess up your good credit. So the only way I would recommend you doing that is don't give her the card. that goes in your credit. Which, depending on what credit you go with, let's say I've had this card. Not all companies do that, so we have to ask, but some companies actually give Susie the credit rating that I've worked for the last 5 years, and the history, and that will bring her scores up. So you can really help somebody quickly if you use the right credit company. Now, I was told that American Express doesn't do that. They only start today. But some of the other ones, like Capital One, whatever, you could really help somebody. But like I said, don't give them the card. The second item that you need to write down is whoever helps the other needs to have a minimum of 2 years of history on that card for it to be helpful at all. 2-year history is the next second item. And the first and the third item, I have 3 lines here. I already said it. Don't give them the card. So number 1, trust issue. Go ahead. The question is, when you add them as an authorized user, does that change my score? Not at all. Because your score is judged by the pie chart from the previous page. You have had a good payment history and all that. That's what you're rated. Adding an authorized user does not alter your score. So now, not everybody can become an authorized user on somebody, because you might not have anybody that would do that for you. So you have a slow way of building scores. And the slow way is getting a secured credit card somewhere. Now we're talking about starting out. You don't have any credit cards and you really need one and nobody wants to give you one. So you could go, some banks have it. I tell you 2 in this town that have it is Navy Federal and US Bank. So I'm giving them some free advertising here. Wells Fargo has it too, but we don't have a local bank here. But those 2, as an example, offer a secure Visa. So if you walk into a US bank and pick up a brochure application, the lowest that you can do is a $300 secured Visa. So that's a credit limit of $300. What makes it secure is you have to walk in there with $300. You bring the money. That's the security deposit. They take the money, they put it in a secured account, let's say, for lack of a better word, like a savings account, and it gets frozen. So now you get this Visa card. Nobody in the world knows that it's a secured Visa because it looks like any other Visa. And you want to start using it, maybe once a month, be very responsible with it, keep the balance low, below 30%, so below $90. And so now the $300 that are frozen is just in case you default, they got your money. So you kind of, if you don't have anything else, that is a really good way to start. And so you want to use it, maybe put a tank of gas in your vehicle once a month, pay it off, do it every month like clockwork. You will build your scores the slow way. This is if you don't have an authorized user that you can, attach to. So if you have 2 of those, that would be great, because you usually need a little. But sooner or later, if you have a good payment history, then the bank will offer you a regular Visa. And then you get your $300 back. So this is just a temporary fix. Usually after about a year, you will get an offer for a normal Visa, get your money back. So the secured card, what you want to write down, upfront deposit. And like I said, golden rule of all credit cards, always keep the balance below 30% of your credit limit. So again, on the $300, never go over $90 on your balance. So that's a second way, a slow way of building credit. Now, if you go to next page, if you're currently renting, you don't have a house, you don't have a house payment, rent is not normally reported on your credit report. So, but you've been doing such a great job paying your rent. Well, there is an organization or website, rentreporters.com, that you can basically have an agreement with and end up getting a positive credit reference for paying your rent on time. So that's a little bit, an extra, what we call a trade line. You want to have several accounts that are open, so you can turn something that doesn't normally show up into something that becomes beneficial for you. Is have your timely rent payments reported. Of course, if you're late on your rent, don't go there. You have to be like clockwork. Now, from credit building, let's say we just talked about credit building. Some people need some credit repair. You have some credit, but it's damaged. Two major methods. Number one, you either deal straight with the creditor, and there are certain things to do or not to do, or you go over the creditor's head and deal straight with the bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. So two completely different approaches. And you might change the approach on a case-by-case basis. Not two accounts may not be the same, different circumstances. So you might have one where you talk to the creditor, and you have others that you might want to go over the creditor's head. So if you were talking to me, I would give you some recommendations based on what I see. It's a case-by-case decision. For example, dealing directly with the creditor would be if, let's say, you had a Visa card and you made timely payments for years, and something slipped through the cracks, and just one time you missed something. If you have a one-time late, you can often deal with a creditor because you're showing a good steady payment history. But now if you have a whole bunch of lates, they're not going to be lenient with you at all. So that would be an example of going to the creditor. Now, dealing directly with the credit bureaus, that's a whole nother ball game, basically. Now, I gave you these numbers, but nobody answers the phone there. It is almost impossible to call anybody at those three credit bureaus. And even if you got a hold of somebody, they don't do anything by phone. Seriously. Phone is wasted time. So then, in writing, if you have to clean something up, you have to do it in writing. The convenient way is to go online at their website, because you can click this little button and it says disputing, and that's what everybody does. Well, guess what? This is all automated. The chances of being successful disputing something online are 0 to 1% maybe. It's all automated. There is no human being really looking at your dispute. There's computers reading it. So stay away from the online disputes. So I'm going to give you, it's crazy as it sounds, probably the only way that you can really deal with it. And I kind of didn't organize this very well. If you go to the next page, disputing an account, so I'm going to backtrack here in a minute, but avoid using the automated dispute resolution process. That's what you want to write in there. They call it the eOscar, and I admit I forgot to look and see what that acronym stands for. But avoid any automation. So how do you get a real life person at a credit bureau to look at your account and really help you clean up your credit? So let's say you wrote a letter. Believe it or not, you want to handwrite a letter. Why? It's because if you type it, it is read by a machine. Mail it by snail mail because you want to put some receipts in there. It's a machine. The only way to have a real life person look at it the first time around, handwrite it, and it's the next item. So when you handwrite, you give them your name, your social, your address, and you handwrite the reason why you want to dispute that, and you want to send proof. Sending proof is powerful. If you don't send proof, the chances are smaller that you'll be successful. But if you have proof, like Verizon charged you $500, and you know you paid that, or they should have let you out of your contract because you had military orders to go elsewhere, and they should not have done that. Well, then if you put that contract from Verizon in there, you are increasing your chances of success with a handwritten letter. And one more thing, do not do not use white paper. Why? Is because if you use like maybe a yellow notebook paper, whatever, you are forcing them a real life person to bypass the computers. Crazy as it sounds, it's the old fashioned way, but that's how you get results. And so you put your proof in there, you state your case in writing, you may have a letter by hand in the last 20 years, but there it is. In order to get results, you bypass the technology. So now I'm going to go back to the previous page because I didn't finish there. And so, oh, go ahead. Anything, even a yellow notepad that you pay for $1, but it somehow it avoids. I know. Boy, you have some high tech class, don't you? But seriously, yeah, anything. The experts that came up with that said that over there, the credit bureaus, if they get colored papers, it's not readable by the machine, and that's what you want. You don't want to read it, and the machine will try to read. But if you have a colorful paper with handwriting, somebody has to handle that. A real life person has to handle that, and they have to deal with it because otherwise, do you know how many millions of pieces of mail they get, and how many millions of online disputes? They don't have enough personnel for that, so it's all handled automatically. So now what you're doing is you're making yours so different that it stands out, and a real life person has to deal with it. Yeah, so a color paper. I've never tried it, but I read up on it, and that's what the experts say, so I'm giving it to you. You know, I would like some feedback. If you really do that, please call me. My card is in a real life story that I can tell, you know? Yeah. Because you want to be the squeaky wheel, you know, and that's what you need to do. So please help, please, if anybody has a success story, I would love for you to share it. Go ahead. I would love to talk to you. So many people use Lexington. I would love to talk to you and do some brainstorming, you know. So it's great. It's great. So back to the previous page, I have fraud alert, which I hadn't finished. So what is a fraud alert? First of all, when I pull somebody's credit, for me on the credit report, if I see in the first page it says fraud alert, that's a big red flag. And depending on what it is, I have to stop where I'm at and ask some questions. And, you know, because when somebody puts a fraud alert on it, hey, something is wrong somewhere. There are 3 types of fraud alerts. Number 1, the initial fraud alert, if you want to write this down, it's good for 90 days. And you do an initial fraud alert if you suspect identity fraud. So it's only a suspicion, but nothing has happened yet, but you're a little worried. So those are the 2 key ingredients. 90 days, and you suspect that somebody might want to harm you. So now, for example, so let me explain. If I pull somebody's credit, let's say I do a phone application, true story, and it's so silly, but it's made to work. I do a phone application with a customer, and I see the fraud alert. And of course, by now they had given me their phone number. So I have to explain to them, I said, I have to hang up the phone now. I have to abide by the direction of the fraud alert. The fraud alert may say something like this: no credit may be issued unless you call me on my cell phone. And a correct cell phone number has to be in there. There are some instructions in that fraud alert. The customer puts that in. So don't just do a fraud alert. When you initiate one on like Equifax, Experian, or TransUnion website, you want to put some detailed instructions there. You type that in. So you want to say, do not issue credit unless you call me on such and such number. Make sure it's a correct number. So I have to stop talking to that person, tell them I have to call you right back because I have to follow the letter of this instruction, hang up the phone, call, which usually is the same number, which is funny. I said, this is me again. Is this, you, Susie, whatever. And she has to tell me, and I have to ask her, Susie, are you applying for a home loan? And she will say yes, and she will laugh because it's legitimate. But can you imagine if a hacker was trying to get some credit, that they stole your identity and they tried to open some credit at some like music store and getting ready to buy some music. All of a sudden, out of the blue, you as a consumer get a phone call from that music store saying, are you applying to buy a whole bunch of music? Well, if that was a hacker, you're going to be so thankful. And you say, oh no, I am not buying any music from you. Well, now we all know this was identity fraud. So it actually works. That creditor must call you at that number. So if somebody really tried to hack you, this would have now protected you. So that fraud alert is very powerful. But that's how it works. Now, what if you had gotten hurt by identity fraud? The number 2 is the extended fraud alert. So the first thing you want to write in there is you are a victim already. You have been hurt. And number 2, it's good for 7 years. So now this is somebody that already got burned. So, and it even blocks soft inquiries from credit card companies, even the people that you do business with. So this is a much bigger fraud alert. It lasts longer. It's for people that have gotten damaged. And then the third one is the active duty fraud alert, which I highly recommend any military person to put on their credit. And you want to write down for 1 year, and of course, active duty. And so what if they're overseas and they're in the desert somewhere and somebody messes with them? Now that makes it way harder on them, but the damage could really happen while they're gone. Alerts are, but if they're done right, you. So now I'm going back to the next one, and we had already covered the top of it. And I want to cover dealing with debt collectors. So we talked about, let's say you had a credit card that was defaulted. Sometimes they handle it internally, but sometimes they turn it over to a debt collector. And I call them the bloodhounds. Because if you do talk to them, all they care about is your money. You pay me. No matter what you tell them, they don't have any compassion. They're hired to collect money from you. Does not matter. You might as well not bother telling them any circumstances. They don't care. They just want money. Many debt collectors pay 50 cents on the dollar on a debt. So if you owed somebody, $1,000, they don't even pay that much. They pay less than that, maybe $100 on the 1,000, and now they chase after you to collect as much money as they possibly can. Now, if they're bugging you on the phone, you have the right to ask any debt collector to put the collection request into a letter in writing and say, I am not dealing with phone. You write it down. You send it to me. Then we deal. So this is your legal right. And that shuts down harassing phone calls as well. So then you ask them for their address. Well, where's your office at? It's probably in another state. You write them a letter, and you put your request in writing, and you tell them, I will not respond to any phone calls. I want this in writing, and then we can deal about this collection. Why? It's because you also want to have time to do your research. What if you don't even know it? That can happen. So don't let anybody bully you on the phone, and instead, make them back off. You write them asking for a written letter, and they write you that letter. Now you have something that you can sink your teeth into. You can do your research. So let's say you determine that you really want to pay that. Then now you can negotiate with them. And by the way, if they call you again, you can warn them that they're in violation of the Fair Debt Collection Act. You can even sue them. You, as a consumer, do have certain rights. Even if you made a mistake and you owe that, you still have certain rights. Now, go ahead. That's right. Good. Good. And that could be an example, and we're going to cover that in a minute, about phishing, phishing, meaning somebody calling you and tricking you into giving out information that is private. So that's a very common method nowadays. It's very sneaky. People drop stuff off or call me at least once a week. You'd be amazed how creative they're getting out there. They get stuff from Wells Fargo, supposedly. We need you to reset your PIN. That's a hacker. Wells Fargo would never ask you by email to reset your PIN. That's a hacker. So don't let anybody fool you with that kind of stuff. Don't, especially on the internet or over the phone. Now if you go to that company's website, let's say you have a Bank of America account and you're on the Bank of America website, that's the only place you feel safe, but don't do anything by email. So many people get information by email. Now, let's say you have a medical collection. There are some protection laws there as well. And a collector is not allowed to discuss any medical information with you on the phone. They shouldn't even know it in the first place. So if they rattle off some medical, that's against the law. I have known of people that, and Lexington might have done that, get out of paying a medical debt just because somebody over the phone talked too much on the collection agency side. Now, when you do determine that you really, really owe something and you feel like, I need to pay that, you want to negotiate the removal and see how lenient they are or how cooperative they are. Instead of just showing up as paid, you want it to be removed because that's better and that helps your scores. So removal is the #1 goal if possible. Not everybody will do it, but if you can get someone to do it, that will really help you a lot. And then on the last page, and we just cut identity theft and how creative it is. So that whole, what I mentioned earlier, email hacks, pretending to be something. Many times you can even catch it because it's not even spelled right, or it has weird email addresses. So don't ever let anybody, pull information out of you by the internet. Credit card fraud happens a lot. People steal things out of your mailbox, applying your name with a different address, and start charging. And you don't know it unless you have a fraud alert. You don't know it until it's too late. Social security numbers get stolen, and we hear that on the news all the time. Even TRICARE got, invaded, and the government got invaded, and so it happens everywhere. Again, mail stolen. Here's a new one. Tax return hackers file false tax returns for refunds. This has been more and more. Can you imagine and Lonnie is gone, but he would, I'm sure he heard some of these stories. You file your taxes and the IRS comes back saying, you already filed. Somebody filed for you and get your refund. So that there's thousands of reported cases. I had somebody where that happened to, and they were waiting on that tax money because they wanted to buy a house. Another 3 months to get that all sorted out. And they couldn't buy the house right away until they got their money. It was a big mess and very stressful. Make sure to shred any documents. Don't throw your documents in the normal trash can. Shred them. I am so meticulous. I pull, like any address, an envelope with my hands. I just rip out my name and address. What goes into my trash will not even have my first name on it. You know, like you get this mail and your first name is on every page. I rip out my name out of everything or any numbers. I don't put anything in the trash that has a name or an account number because people go through your trash. And another big one is medical identity theft. So people do insurance fraud, for example, where they file for prescription drugs in your name and have it sent to them. And then they have the drugs and they sell them on the black market. Terrible crime. And another one is there's people that are phony medical clinics filing phony medical claims against your insurance and drives insurance cost up. So you definitely want to be very careful with any medical information. And more than 60% of all bankruptcies are from medical debt of some kind, which is sad. You know, we don't have any control over our medical bills. So last, I want to give you one more good piece of information. We talked about fraud alert, but there's something even more powerful than that called freezing your credit. However, don't freeze your credit if you plan on making a purchase, whether it's a car or a house, because to unfreeze your credit, you cannot apply it while it's frozen. So what makes freezing your credit different from fraud alert? Fraud alert happens after somebody did something. Freezing prevents anybody from using your credit at all. So I put the quick overview here. In a freeze, nobody can even inquire about your credit report without your direct authorized permission through the use of a secret PIN. Nobody will be able to open an account in your name because nobody will be able to see your credit information to make a decision about it. So I had somebody in my office, they gave me their social, they gave me everything, and in my loan application, I clicked on it where I normally click to pull their credit. Nothing came up. And then I got a red flag message saying, this is frozen. I couldn't even pull their credit. And that's what that's made to do. So then they wanted to buy a house. They had completely forgotten that they had frozen their credit. So then they had to unfreeze the credit. Now it costs $10 for Equifax, $10 for Experian, $10 for TransUnion to freeze it. And then same thing, $10 each to unfreeze it. So we had to wait a few days. They unfroze their credit with the 3 credit bureaus. And then I clicked the button and sure enough, here was their credit. This is fantastic if you don't need to buy anything soon because it could bless anybody from even pulling your credit. So this, in my opinion, is the safest of all. So key element, don't initiate a freeze before buying something where somebody has to pull your credit. That's number one. And the second item, as I just said, it does cost $10 for each credit bureau. And so that, to me, is the safest of all, and you just have to spend a little bit of money, but I think it's worth it. And then just some miscellaneous information on student loans, because student loans are installment accounts. You have the federal and the private. And if, God forbid, you default on a federal loan, you could not get any other federal program, such as another student loan or a house with like a VA loan, until you pay that back. You also could not file for bankruptcy. Well, you can file for bankruptcy, but you cannot put a federal student loan inside a bankruptcy. Now, if you have a private student loan, that could go into bankruptcy if you needed to. I'm hoping that never happens to you. So, but those are just some tidbits to help you to build credit, to repair credit, and to protect credit. So that, and if you have any questions.
Yes. Concerning bankruptcy, does it still take 7 years to repair your credit from bankruptcy? And if so, what's additional can you do to speed up that process?
Good question. So there are different kinds of bankruptcies. The most common are Chapter 13 and Chapter 7. And they're very different from each other. Chapter 7 is the big one. That's where all your debts basically are wiped clean, zero balance, and it's like you start with a clean slate, but it has a longer waiting period. Um, it will be on your credit report. I've seen it up to 10 years, but that doesn't mean your life is put on hold for 10 years. My recommendation is if you have to go through a bankruptcy, the moment you can, you need to reestablish credit, because any creditor in the future looks for responsible, reestablished, timely credit. So believe it or not, you have to have a few things open in order to rebuild your life. Chapter 7 bankruptcy on a VA loan, it's a 2-year wait, but VA gives you another chance. Say, now other programs have a 3-year wait, programs have a 4-year wait. So it depends on each program, but VA is a 2-year wait after chapter 7, as long as you have nothing negative afterwards, and as long as you have rebuilt your credit in your life and showing the ability to pay on time and also the ability to save. So, here's the thing. If you have filed for bankruptcy and all of a sudden all those bills are gone, and hopefully you haven't lost your job, what you really need to do is save, 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 and show that you're completely changing your spending habits. So that's number 1. Chapter 13 bankruptcy is a repayment arrangement. So instead of the slate being wiped clean, you go before the judge and you do a payment plan, X amount of dollars. Let's say you have 3 credit cards and 1 student loan, and altogether, they're $1,000, whatever. Then the judge dictates you pay $1,000 for 5 years, and after that time, those bills are paid. So now, because you're making the effort to pay things back, has a shorter waiting period. It's a 1-year wait period instead of the 2, but it's more difficult because you really are making payments. So if you're really going to go into bankruptcy, you need to have an attorney look at it and give you some good legal advice. So go ahead.
For children who are now adults but found out that their parents use their social security number,
Ugly.
how can they go by I think Pastor Marty just got upset with that. But how can the kids straighten out that because they was not aware that it happened?
Right. And you know what? I missed that on the last child identity. You'd be sad to know how many times that happens. You'd be sad to know how many times it's the parents doing it, not a stranger, but the parents. It's usually the parents that have bad credit, and they cannot get any more credit. They have burned all their bridges. And what do? They take the child's social security number, because nowadays their child gets that number since it was a baby. They falsify the birthday of that child to make it older, same address, and now they're starting to ruin the child's credit. It's very difficult, because what we tell people in order to clean credit up that was abused, the identity theft, number 1, you're supposed to go to the police. Number 2, you're supposed to talk to the fraud department of this credit card company. Let's say you have a Visa card that was opened in your name. Well, which child goes to the police on their parents? You would have to take legal action against your parents. So 99% of the time that is not going to happen. So that child has to basically let time drop off some things. It is not happening overnight. You either have to say, this is wrong and I'm taking legal action, because see, if it's proven that it's fraud, it will be removed. But in order to do that, you have to take legal action against your parents. So 99% of the time, they are in a bad position. They really got hurt, and that parent really, really damaged their start in life. It is very ugly. And it happens from the parents to the children, and sometimes it happens from the children to the parents, especially with elderly parents. So we see it on both sides. It is terrible, because who is going to take, legal action against their own family? Yeah. Yeah. They deserve it. They need to be punished, but a lot of people don't do it. So anyway, if you have any other questions, I'm here, or any
Any
private
questions?
questions.
Do you still offer the service, Miss? As far as if someone comes to see you, you'll go through their credit score with the credit report with them.
Um, I mean, I do it as part of them coming to me wanting to buy a house.
Yes, ma'am.
And I spend a lot of time with some of them, and I'm very happy to do it because I'm hoping that I eventually can do a home loan for them. We also, Wells Fargo has a free program called My Home Roadmap, again, for people hoping to buy a house, where they can talk to a regular credit counselor and we pay for it. So we help future homeowners. I cannot do it outside of the lending process, you know. Um, but I mean, I can give somebody my 2 cents worth, of course, you know. But pooling their credit and helping them only for people that are in the process of buying a home. So, so, so thank you.
Thank you. All right. So we would like to give you this small token of appreciation. And my testimony with you, I think it was back in 2002. 2002, I think it was, long time ago. Our credit was not the best, and you didn't know us from, like, we just happened to walk in your office, and we wanted to eventually buy a home, and just your mannerism and your spirit, how you sat down with us, went over our credit report. Even though we didn't buy a home with under Wells Fargo, you changed our life in a year. You gave us the knowledge to not only straighten our credit score up, but when we built our house, we were debt free. So that changed our life forever. Um, Now we are with Wells Fargo. It came full circle, but the impact that you have had on me and Bishop life have been irremarkable. We able to pass it on, and I will never forget that. And it's so true, everything that you said today, because all of us have gone through co-signing, having someone put false stuff on our credit. So the class you gave today was so informative. And it's something that even if you watch it on Facebook or YouTube, make sure you go back through that everything. So we thank you. Thank you. You're a wonderful, beautiful person. And we appreciate you. So on behalf of myself and Bishop and Shekinah, we would like to present you with this.
All right. Well, this concludes our empowerment STM Financial Management 2018. This concludes our empowerment. Please feel free to go back through and watch on Facebook or YouTube on our YouTube channel, Shekinah Tabernacle Men's, and also our Facebook, which is Shekinah TM. Awesome. So once again, thank everyone for attending today, either by Facebook or by YouTube. And I just want to say something additional to our lecturers for the day. I asked a lot of people to would they be ready to present a presentation today, and some said no, some said yes, some said I'll get back with you. But the ones that have presented today is the ones that we have depended on every year for the last 4 years. And they have a great track record when it comes to being people of strong character and integrity. I just want to say that because if they say they're going to be here, they are here and they are doing it. So I thank you, Miss Ina. I thank you, Lonnie. I thank you, Mark, for all that y'all have done in our life and for our relationships. So once again, thank you so much. And y'all have a blessed evening and enjoy the rest of your weekend. God bless.